The loudspeaker echoed over the field. Next demonstration. Pakistan Air Force aircraft, JF-17 Thunder. Pilot, Flight Lieutenant Azan Qureshi. The crowd barely reacted, a few heads turned. Not in excitement, just curiosity. They were waiting to be unimpressed. Azan walked toward the jet with steady steps. No swagger, no show. He climbed the ladder quietly, placed his helmet on and took his seat inside the cockpit. There were no fancy touchscreens, no luxury displays, just switches, dials, real instruments, old-school flying. Pure, focused flight. Azan called the tower. Tower, this is Falcon Lead, requesting taxi for demo run. Falcon Lead, you are cleared. Proceed to runway 3A. Talha's voice crackled over the radio. You ready to surprise them? On replied, without hesitation, no. I'm ready to shut them up. The ground crew stepped back. An tightened his grip on the controls. The canopy slid shut with a hiss. The engine growled to life, not loud, not flashy, but serious. The jet rolled onto the runway. No flames, no theatrical afterburner, just clean, sharp motion. A British pilot leaned forward in his chair near the press tent. Let's see what this little thing can really do. And then, the JF-17 took off. Not like the others, it didn't glide forward into the sky. It shot straight up. Vertical climb, instant wait. Is he going vertical off the runway? An RAF engineer dropped his snack. The JF-17 climbed sharply into the cloudy sky, disappearing into the mist. Silence fell over the crowd. Even the vloggers stopped streaming for a second. No one expected this. Then, out of the clouds, the jet dove and pulled a cobra maneuver. The nose lifted sharply. The jet almost paused mid-air, then rolled smoothly forward. It was aggressive, controlled, confident. People gasped. Phones came back up. A few even started clapping lightly. Unsure, an American colonel near the VIP area leaned to his colleague and whispered, "Did that thing just do high alpha without stalling?" Nobody answered. Nobody could. In the control tent, Talha watched. The flight data closely. G-force, holding angle stable, thrust balance good. He looked at the engineers beside him. He's not even flying full tilt. Back in the sky, An wasn't showing off. He wasn't performing for the crowd. He was flying for himself, and for everyone back home. He rolled the JF-17 hard to the right. A tight, clean rotation. No shaking, no hesitation. The jet moved. Like a natural part of the sky, then came the brake turn. 7 Gs, wing dipped, nose tucked. Jet leaned in and sliced through the air. It looked like a move meant for a much more expensive fighter. A French officer said softly, "That's not thrust, that's control." Suddenly, the mood changed. The crowd, which had laughed earlier, now stood still. Every eye in the airfield was watching. Every pilot near the runway was focused. What was supposed to be a budget plane was now flying like it belonged among the best, and An was still holding back. He climbed again, looped, spun, dove, each move sharper than the last, each one more confident. Even the announcer paused between words. The silence around the jet wasn't boredom. It was respect forming. Slowly and surely, then the JF-17 slowed down midair, turned tight once more, and climbed again. Clean, smooth, and deadly calm. Talha watched the numbers on his screen spike. Then, suddenly, An flipped a switch in the cockpit. A new screen came alive, and what happened next would silence not just the airshow, but command rooms across the world. They didn't whisper behind closed doors. They laughed openly, without shame. Laughed at the jet, laughed at the name, laughed at the flag painted on its side. The Royal International Air Tattoo was no place for jokes. It was serious business. The biggest airshow in the world. A place where legends fly. Where jets like the F-22 Raptor and the Eurofighter Typhoon steal the spotlight. Where crowds cheer at high-speed passes, wild turns, and thunderous roars. And into this world of giants came Pakistan's JF-17 Thunder. Small, quiet, grey, pulled in on a flatbed truck, not even flown in. It looked like something from another era. Old, basic, maybe even forgotten. People noticed, and people laughed. Across the tarmac to British RAF engineers looked at the jet, shook their heads, and chuckled. "Looks like something built in a college workshop," one said, just loud enough for others to hear. Did Pakistan actually bring that here? Near the crowd barriers, a group of teenage aviation vloggers were streaming live on their phones. One kid zoomed in and said sarcastically, "Apparently, Pakistan just remembered they have an air force." People dropped laughing emojis in the comments. Others joked in the chat, "Is that a lawnmower or a fighter jet? Is it here to race drones?" The JF-17 sat silently among its shiny neighbors, F-35s, Eurofighters, Rafales, jets that looked like they came from the future. And next to them, this little grey machine seemed like a museum piece. No one clapped, no one admired, they just laughed. Because that's what people do when they think they already know the story. But in the prep tent, there was no laughing, no jokes, no sarcasm, just silence, focus, and discipline. Flight Lieutenant on Karachi stood quietly as his ground crew worked around him. There was no flash, no yelling, no stress, just calm hands, checking every bolt, every switch, every panel. Zipped up his flight suit slowly, his movements precise. He wasn't worried about the noise outside. He was listening to something else, the quiet voice inside that said, "Today matters." His co-pilot, Talha, leaned in and whispered, "They're calling us a joke." On didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He simply placed his hand on the side of the jet, right where the faded paint showed his father's old squadron emblem. His father had flown Mirages. Old, outdated, underpowered. But he had flown them with pride, because he flew for the flag, not for the applause. His father's words echoed in his mind. "Beta, the sky doesn't care how expensive your plane is. It listens to the one who dares to guide it." On had heard that sentence many times as a boy. And now, as a man, standing next to this so-called budget jet, he believed it more than ever. The JF-17 didn't have stealth features. It didn't have a billion-dollar price tag, but it had something the others didn't, a purpose to prove, and a pilot who had trained for this day his entire life, as the time ticked closer to takeoff. Small whispers passed through the foreign crews. Why is Pakistan even here? Are they just showing presence? Probably a political stunt. A French officer walking by mumbled, "Diplomacy jet, not combat." On heard it, but he didn't respond. Instead, he looked up at the cloudy British sky, thick with mist, grey like his aircraft. He took a deep breath, pulled on his gloves, and walked toward the ladder. Across the runway, another pilot folded his arms and said with a smirk, "Let's see what this toy can do." They thought they knew what would happen next, but they didn't know the jet. They didn't know the pilot, and they definitely didn't know what the sky was about to witness. Inside the cockpit, On flipped the switch. The screen in front of him changed. Tactical simulation. ONA. New radar overlay appeared. His fingers moved quickly, steady, confident. Within seconds, the system beeped. Target locked. Simulated. Eurofighter, Typhoon, flying above him at 8,000 feet. On had locked it midair, in real time. No rehearsal, no trick. Just precision and timing. Down on the ground, the big screen by the runway lit up. The crowd saw it, a digital box over the Typhoon's icon. The unmistakable sound of a lock-on tone echoed faintly across the field. People froze. A British reporter near the front gasped. An American pilot stood up, wide-eyed. Someone whispered, "Did he just lock onto a NATO fighter during the demo?" The announcer's voice shook through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing is a simulated combat lock, part of Pakistan's display protocol, but everyone could feel it. This wasn't just protocol. This was a statement, and On didn't brag, he didn't wave. He didn't point to the radar, he simply flew, low, smooth, and quiet. He passed the crowd with the same calm he had at the start. Then, just before finishing, he dipped the nose of the jet slightly. Just for a second, not to show off, not to mock. Just enough to say, "Now you see." And the crowd did. Phones that had once streamed jokes were now live with respect. Pilots who had once ignored the jet now stared in silence. The JF-17 Thunder landed. It didn't roar on arrival. It glided in, taxied slowly back to its spot, and shut down. No loud applause. No flags waving. Just an entire airfield holding its breath. Azan sat still in the cockpit for a few seconds. He breathed in the silence, the warm hum of electronics, and the scent of metal and sweat. Then calmly, he removed his helmet and stepped down. This time, all the cameras turned toward him. Not because he was famous. Because he had changed the room. He wasn't a guest anymore. He was a presence. Inside the debrief tent, senior officers from NATO, the UK, France, and the UAE sat around a table. The air was stiff. The British Commodore spoke first. "We'll skip the formalities. Your demo surprised us." On gave a single, respectful nod. That was the point. An American commander leaned forward. "That lock-on, was it pre-programmed?" Unanswered calmly. "No, sir. Liv calculated. Trained for it." A French officer frowned. "With what radar?" KJ-7A. "Modified." "Modified by who?" "Our own engineers." They paused, not because they didn't believe it, but because they did. They weren't just seeing a jet anymore. They were seeing a nation they had underestimated, now showing its own skill, its own systems, its own pilots. Then came the real question. If this was a real battle, one asked, would you bet on that aircraft? On looked him in the eyes. "No, sir. I'd bet on the pilot who never forgets what his airspace costs to defend." And that answer hit harder than any maneuver in the sky. Later that day, outside the hangars, On sat alone for a moment. Helmet in his lap, breathing in the late afternoon air. The crowd had moved on. But something had shifted. Hashtags were trending online.